the groups were numbered, so we may as well take them in order of the number of groups, assuming that people remember which group number they were in, which, that might be challenging, but I guess we'll see. But why don't we start out with group number one? I think that was
And that
maybe
would have
the
been like Beverly and
Beverly and
Mike and
Mike.
Miko
Yeah.
in that group there.
Yeah. Who would like to report out from your group? Raise your
Um,
hand.
I don't know how to raise my hand, but
I hear you just fine.
Oh,
So
okay. I mean, I know how to raise my hand, just not on Zoom yet.
Great.
We just some of the thoughts that came. We have to. I can't recall which gentleman mentioned it, but I thought it was great about like disagreeing is actually a positive thing if we're making progress. If we can identify it, it was Lynn who said that. And if we can identify it and have conversations, then it's a good thing to disagree. You can respectfully disagree. We talked a little bit about the structure of open closed primaries, the cultural issue. We need to speak and listen to each other's. One of the things that resonated with, I think it was Jill, was she liked the fact of the congressman being put together in a dorm room, I believe, or a dorm or something like that. And the other structural areas were gerrymandering, electoral college. We got into a little bit of the toxic media environment. It's not going to go away. How do you fix it? There was chat about getting cameras off the floor of Congress being filmed, yet you need transparency. So, where's the fine line there? Let's see, when we talked about where we get our media sources from, TV, newspaper, a lot of which are run by big corporations. And then in the role of public servants and responsibilities, Miko had suggested there needs to be real police accountability. And I think it was a case, Connor versus Grant, but I'm not sure about that. And that's where we left off.
Yeah.
That would be correct.
Thank you, Miko.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of good comments. A lot of those were kind of similar in our group. And I encourage everyone to, as we're talking, if you want to type into the chat kind of your best points and ideas that you sort of came up with, or if you want to sort of agree to, what people are saying, or if you have, a little bit of a nuanced difference, feel free to do that, because we'll download that too at the end. So it's a good way to just put it all out there. We'll do 2 conversations at once. That's always fun. The next group is Kathy's group, number 2. If you'd like to give us a bit of a recap on what you all talked about.
Sorry about that. I was muted.
Oh, there you are.
All right, there I am. So we talked about a few things that resonated with us. One was the media and how the media and extremism of it seems to just pull both directions toward the extreme. I think an example that was used was like it's a centrifuge, so it like spins around and pulls everything to the outside. It doesn't move us toward the center. It moves everything in every direction away from the center. Yeah. Another topic that came up was the idea of like mob violence hurting poor people, and the idea that it's not who you think it is, that there's sort of a lot of misconceptions surrounding about events. That was something that came up in our group. We also talked about access to the ballot and voting rights, and the idea that not everyone is able to vote adequately, and that the solution of vote them out to politicians sort of doesn't have any teeth if people aren't able to access the ballot and vote. We also talked about open primaries and independent voters. So like the idea is in some states, because of gerrymandering or just because of the makeup of the state, there's no chance for the other party to really win. So as a result, who the candidate is going to be decided at the primary level, right? So it's which, like in some states, whoever the Democrat is will win, or whoever the Republican is will win. So if you have a closed primary system where only members of that party can vote, then essentially independent voters and voters of the minority party have no ability to decide who the representative is. And so that's sort of a concern there. Lastly, we also talked about the incentives, the comment about like financial incentives, right? And how the idea about money in politics, it's not really enough to just look at, hey, they're contributing money to campaigns, because campaign contributions, while politicians like them, that's just one facet of it. The other part is the personal contributions, the fact that politicians are personally getting rich off betraying the electorate, right? And stuff like the COVID crash, right? Think about how many politicians made millions of dollars shorting the market right before the crash happened to the economy when COVID was announced. So stuff like, it's things like that too. It's the incentive structure is politicians get paid bank to do things other than govern effectively, and we probably need to fix that. And that's about it for us, I think.
Yeah. Simple things, right? Piece of cake. Group 3, let's see, that was the one that Daniel was in. Who would like to chime in and report out for your group?
I've got that one.
Excellent.
So we had quite an interesting conversation, and I'd like to thank Cheryl for pointing this one out. And it was kind of her last point that she put out. But did anybody notice that all those folks that were quoted are no longer in office? It's easy to say when what you say. It's easy to say something like that after you left. So that was quite interesting. It didn't dawn on me, but we talked about looking in the mirror, because that's part of the problem. And again, the primaries being untouchable if you win the primaries. That seems to be a common theme with the other groups. Talked about the parties having too much power and the people are not being represented, and it's more like an oligarchy and not a democracy. And one of our members, Larry, made a point that this organization that's putting this on is the people, but we can say we the people. He thinks we need to come back together to form a more perfect union, and that's what our goal is to get out. And one of the other issues that we talked about was legislation just by executive order came up, that it's too easy to put that pen to paper and just push things through and not actually have consensus.
Yeah. Lots of good thoughts. Thanks, Jeff. Next room was room 4. That was the room that Katie was in. Who in your group would like to do that?
I'm happy to do a recap, and then guys, if I screw up, feel free to add stuff. But we had Dennis, Elena, Gail, Ramon, and myself, and it was just a pleasure. For missing from the report, we did feel like really trying to address like when people do actually act in the best interest of good governance, when there is compromise, like where's the accountability for making sure that that's celebrated, that there's incentives around that there's media stories on that there's like an effort to really show and highlight that is happening, and the encouragement behind like good behavior, basically, as well as when people are then taking direct actions that go against that or like misleading, like maybe it comes off like they're doing good governance, but really it's for a different reason or whatever, like the accountability to be able to highlight that as well, and to actually have something that's enforceable for when you're going against what's good for our government. And then that led us into a really strong conversation about accountability that probably took out about half of what we talked about. Really, accountability, and I think the report highlights the many different areas where accountability is lacking, but that until we can really address that, until we can get accountability, until people can enforce accountability, until politicians add accountability themselves, that we're going to continue to fight an uphill battle. And that's really the underlying issue when it comes to a lot of these dynamics. We talked about also the incentive around when a politician is in office. For most politicians across the country, that is their livelihood, and giving up your livelihood by not getting reelected, of course, leaves could be an incentive. And also that just the way that our government has come into place and been structured, like when you are the way you get a higher position in Congress is that you have seniority and you've been there around longer. And that might not actually be what's best for the people, and may not keep the accountability with the people who elected you there, but more the accountability with the party. Our group actually saw a wide range of issues that we felt like were the top priority. So money in politics, getting it out of politics was definitely one of them. Gerrymandering, term limits, and independents being able to have more of an actual say, as well as constituents in general being able to have a say in the political process and have their voices, votes, actually be able to have influence throughout different parts of the policy making process to the political process. Just some of the things we talked about. And we did talk about too that like with some of these problems, especially money in politics, it can feel pretty overwhelming pretty quickly on like, what can we do about this to get accountability most quickly, even if it feels like one of the higher priorities for how do we change things, but like, how can we actually, start to add in that accountability?
Yeah. Great. And breakout room 5 was the one that was Debbie was in. Please tell us a recap.
Okay, I'm Steve. I'm going to provide that. We had some help, but I was joined by my fellow independents, June and Howard and Julie. And I put the summary of our discussion on the chat at 8:55. And we had 3 main points that came out. The main one was that it's difficult even for voters to have constructive discussions when we're bombarded by a framing of every issue as belonging to the left or the right or one party or the other. And second of all, the parties they operate by fear, by vilifying the other side. And so they manipulate the voters and the candidates through that, which is that mechanism. So we've got to break that. And third, we believe that change is not going to come from politicians. It's going to have to come from the grassroots. And we've been at the forefront of electoral reform, which is the key to all of that for many years, and examples of when primaries, ranked choice voting, multi-member districts. So that's it.
Great, thank you for that. And I was in room 6. I'll give a quick recap of what we talked about. Yeah, we thought that the report resonated with us quite a bit. A lot of the same topics that other folks have mentioned in terms of the importance of primaries, the importance of having things like ranked choice voting and open primaries and final 5 kinds of structures that would allow for more people to be able to run successfully. And just that the current structure with the 2 parties just makes it, winning the most important thing always, as opposed to actually governing well and working for the people and doing what it is that the people need them for them to do. But at the same time, we ended on a very optimistic note and reflected on the fact that our system has been in place for a long time now and has weathered storms like this before. And we're optimistic that we can get through it again and feel like this is a point in history where there's really an opportunity to make some productive changes and to really, make a difference. So that was our group. I want to acknowledge that we're just a couple minutes over, but if you have just a few more minutes to stay with us, I believe that Sarah has some polls set up for us, and also we have just a few closing remarks. So,
may I interject a question for Michael Murphy? Is that report available on the Fix Us website?
Absolutely, for sure.
Okay.
Yep, fixusnow.org. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'll drop it in the chat as well so everyone has it. Thank you so much. It's pretty amazing the depth of conversation we got in 15 minutes. So excited to see where this series and where our assembly, which we'll tell you a little about, will take us. Before we get there, as Ramsey mentioned, we have a quick poll that I'm going to send up for you guys. We would love to get your feedback on the future topics for these, what we call our citizen engagement forums. So this is a multiple choice. Let us know all the ones you'd be interested in, or if there's another conversation related to going on in this democracy space and how to make it a little bit better. Please feel free to drop that in the chat as we take a look at all those things that get put in the chat, all those comments and questions and suggestions. So give just a minute there. While you're taking that, I also will note a couple things that we have coming up, and I'll include this in the chat and in a follow-up. We've got, as Ramsey said, 2 additional events on the calendar. So mark your calendar for Tuesday, March 23rd, along with Tuesday, April 13th. I'll get these in the chat so I get the dates right. Those are our next events, and we'll be taking into consideration, like I said, the feedback we get from you here, as well as different conversations that we've had. So that would be great to hear from you there. Give just one more minute. Everyone feel free to answer that poll real quickly.
Sarah, are we supposed to check? Are we supposed to check the thing that we can see, or are we supposed to write in the chat?
Yeah, any of those that sound like, yep, I would sign up and want to be a part of that. Check those. It's multiple choice, so as many of those options as sound interesting. And if you've got some other ideas, like, we'd love to hear those in the chat as well. Feel free to include those too.
Can you put it back up?
Should be. We also, we'll continue to get feedback on these as well as we're continuing to develop them and refine those, the topics. The other thing that we wanted to kind of get on your radar, as we've mentioned, these events are leading into what we call our National Assembly of the People. It'll be happening in May the 16th. Just got our date locked down, so we'll send you this information as well. But if you enjoyed this and got something out of this conversation, as we continue these, you'll want to make sure to join us for that event as well. As Ramsey said, we are a little bit over time. We can definitely keep the conversation going, but want to make sure to be respectful of the hour that we asked for. So if you have to go, want to thank Mike again so much for joining us. This was amazing. It was great to hear about this incredible report and be able to talk about what that looks like and the work that we're doing. So thank you so much to Mike, and thanks everyone for giving us your Wednesday night. It was great to see you. Like I said, we can keep the conversation going, but if you got to go, thanks, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank
and
you.
Sarah, we'll be sending an email too, right, for asking